Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Friday Morning at the Funhouse alongside Mr. Martin
Yes.
Popoff.
Morning,
Whichever,
sir. How are you?
whichever side you were going to be on, Martin, I don't know. I never can
Absolutely.
tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never can tell. How you
Absolutely.
doing this morning?
Good. Well, we're on the side of summer because February, I was just heard on the news today, is supposed to be basically warm and mild for the rest of February, which is really weird in Toronto because this is supposed to be our crushing month. So I don't know.
You know what? February has been that here in New York for the last bunch of years, but we've had just rain and I guess mildish temperatures, 40. I guess
Yeah.
40 for February is kind of mild. It's like we had that one really cold week in January, and then it's been fairly mild since, and you have to wonder if that was the big winter week, and the rest of it's just kind of going to be like
Yeah.
this. It's just been
Yeah.
raining constantly and
Yeah.
somewhat mild and foggy. It's just whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess it could be worse. It could be tons of snow and sub-zero temperatures, and I don't mind that for a month or so, but yeah, I don't want that for the whole winter. So yeah, if this is what it's going to be, whatever. Bring on the spring, I guess. It's a little too early to say that because you know what'll happen. We'll get a foot and a half of snow in 3 weeks
Yeah.
as we get ready for March. So
Well, this
anyway,
episode brings the sun, right? Because this
yes, it
episode
does.
of where it's about, they have no weather over there. It's always sunny all the time, right?
Always sunny all the time out in LA, right? So, or wherever some of these bands come from. So, Martin and I were, of course, as always, talking about topics we can kind of ponder and discuss here on the channel. And for a while, we've been wanting to do something that revolves around kind of the history of or the creation of the genesis of this thing we call hair metal or glam metal. I know a lot of people don't like that term, but when you say it, everybody knows what you're talking about. We're not trying to put
Yeah.
it down. A lot of great music, a lot of great bands that did this sort of big hair pop choruses and loads of guitars and the look and all that sort of thing. We all know what it is. So what Martin and I've kind of crafted here today is to try and figure out what are those important proto hair metal bands and albums? Like, who were the bands and what were some of the albums that maybe really influenced this whole movement that for, what are we saying here, Martin, 83 to 89, something like that?
Yeah.
84 to 89. So this,
91. Yeah.
yeah,
Almost
it's 91. So
91 pretty easily.
roughly
Yeah.
not quite a decade, right? We're looking like 8 years or so where you had all these bands. We know who they are. We're going to talk about them today, but like kind of what were the building blocks that kind of allowed that to happen? So we've each picked out six bands, maybe six albums, or we'll talk about a few more albums that maybe kind of laid the groundwork for all that to happen. And what were some of those characteristics of these bands that kind of carried over into all these other bigger bands like Bon Jovi and Poison, and we'll mention all of them today, I'm sure. But we're not specifically talking about those bands. We're talking about the ones that kind of broke the ground for that to happen. So I'll have Martin. I don't know if you want to extrapolate a little bit there and give us your first pick.
Yeah, so we've got six each, and there's a lot of cool concepts here. So I'm gonna try not to go over and mention any of your bands or any of my other bands and stuff. So try to keep it partitioned. So I think all the concepts will come out as we go. But the first one I want to talk about is Aerosmith, specifically Rock's era, Draw the Line, this kind of idea, where essentially this is the band that I think from the 70s, being a big band, having lots of records out, I think it's the band that most exemplifies what we're going to get with hair metal. You got five guys. They all got long hair. They all dress up really cool, and Steven Tyler with the scarves and all that. So they're getting the dress down. But even the music, you've got the blues in there. It's hard rock. It's modern. So it's mixing all these things together. It's party stuff. It's about sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all that kind of thing. So I think the band, there's other bands, and I noticed like one that isn't in any of our things here, but Led Zeppelin is really talked about. A lot of these bands are influenced by Led Zeppelin, but by proxy, it comes through Aerosmith as well. So I think essentially what you get here is the band that that the hair metal guys really grew up on and looked up to. I mean, they obviously grew up on a lot of different bands, but I think Aerosmith is really the best blueprint. And it's odd that essentially their influence, I think, begins to wane by 79 with Night in the Ruts, and really not a lot of people are paying attention. Rock in a Hard Place as you ramp up. So Aerosmith spends Aerosmith spends like the completely adjacent years, that 79 through to 85, Done with Mirrors, that whole era, as being a little bit fallow and on the rocks, and what's going on. But as kids, you talk to someone like Nikki Sixx and a lot of these guys, it's like Aerosmith rocks changed their lives kind of thing. So yeah, that's my first choice. I'll try keep it partitioned. I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess we could kind of talk about some of the bands that were heavily influenced, right? So, do you get a Guns N' Roses? Do you get a Faster Pussycat? Do you get a Cinderella without Aerosmith, right? I don't
Yeah,
think so.
perfect.
It's not
Yeah,
in that fashion, right? So, yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
All right, I think both Martin and myself's first choices are really, really important here to this whole movement, and mine is Van Halen. Again, insert any Van Halen album, right? But you got to go back to the first album. First of all, you just look at them, right? So here you have this, outspoken, charismatic front man with the big long locks. He's got the fancy pants. He's got the hairy open chest, right? You got this guitar player, Eddie Van Halen, which really the blueprint for a lot of the LA bands. I mean, the guitar style. So first, here with this album and all the albums to come, you got this guitar player who's doing something different. He's flashy. He does the tapping, the whammy bar, these big metallic riffs, fast playing, right? So many guitar players in his wake, right? That permeated all these bands that really became popular during the 80s. Blueprints right here. You got these songs again about women and partying and cars and all this stuff. There's an anthemic quality to all these Van Halen records. But it's not really metal, or is it? Right? It's like this glossy metallic hard rock. It really, really works. And look at all the bands who kind of took this blueprint, where you had the charismatic front man, the shredder on guitar, the thunderous rhythm section. I mean, Rad and Poison and Motley Crue, Doc and White Lion. We can go on and on and on. The LA scene basically loved this to death. And Quiet Riot, maybe even, and all these other bands just kind of followed in this wake and took this blueprint and ran with it. And again, you could say that Van Halen also took from Zeppelin and Aerosmith and Montrose and all those other bands, but they made it arena ready instantly. And I think the rest of the LA scene just kind of followed this going forward and would never look back. So yeah, Van Halen, first choice.
Yeah, and the other important thing, so 2 points, is that they are setting the template with the whole hotshot guitarist about town. You got your Carlos Cavazos and your Warren DeMartini and George Lynch and Jakey Lee and all these guys coming up, Randy Rhoads. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing is you get a 78 album, a 79 album, an 80 album, an 81, an 82.
Boom, boom,
you get
boom.
5 of the sacred texts of blueprints for hair metal. I mean, if Aerosmith didn't give you enough, and some of these other bands we're going to talk about, I mean, to have this onslaught of Van Halen albums before the first year of hair metal, it's like just all laid out right there for you. So they're probably the number one most important answer out of the 12 we're going to talk about. So my next one, this is a little obscure, but I love this point. My next band is Loverboy. You might go with the second album, Get Lucky. There they are on the back there. That's a little bit of a hair metal look there. The black and white photo, the hair, going off in the distance. But this is 1981. This was a huge album. And then up into this era, we're actually in the hair metal years, so they are participating. But also seminal is the debut. And my point with this band is that the pre-hair metal years were these sort of AOR rock / pomp rock sort of years. And I did a whole podcast episode called Did Canada Invent Hair Metal? And the idea there was that Loverboy, with having these albums, I mean, Get Lucky was 4 times platinum. It was a huge album. The first one was big as well. But you've got the likes of Headpins, Toronto, Coney Hatch, Helix, Trooper, Prism, Lynx, all these bands no one's ever heard of, like Lynx, Hammersmith, Mad Cats, The Hunt, Bryan Adams even early on, Sweeney Todd, Tease, Moxie. So you've got this pile of bands from Canada for some reason that are doing this kind of post-Styx pomp rock, hard rock thing in that, well pre hair metal years of literally starting like in 76, 77, 78. And so moving through the 70s hard rock thing, which again is Aerosmith and Kissy and Ted Nugent enough, but then moving into the pomp rock thing or the AOR rock thing, which is like I say, heavy sticks, a pile of these Canadian bands. But Loverboy starts getting a little tougher, a little more streamlined. There's still the keyboards and stuff, but they're huge sellers, right? So nobody really talks about them as an influence, but you got to think that they're almost like, even if bands aren't going to admit Loverboy was a big deal, it's almost like the genre itself, if it could speak, would almost say, Loverboy is kind of like a stepping stone to this, because look how big they were.
Yeah, I think one of the things you said early on is really true. I mean, those pop hooks all throughout those Loverboy songs. I mean, that was so important to this thing called hair metal. And having these anthemic hard rock songs played all over the radio. I mean, radio plays a huge part in all of this, I think, too. So yeah, it's a great pick. That's a great pick. All right, next up, I'm gonna go Ted Nugent. All right, so Cat Scratch Fever 1977, the first and second album, obviously before that. And then you got Weekend Warriors and State of Shock and Scream Dream and all these albums. And early on, it's kind of like a similar to the Van Halen thing. You got this charismatic lead singer, front man, but also you got this wild lead guitar player who's really the leader of the band, and he's also the front man. He also sings. After Derek St. Holmes is gone from the band, you basically got like the front man, the singer, the guitar player. That's all him, right? That's all Ted. You got the big long hair strutting around. He's got, again, the similar thing, the no shirt thing, or wearing all these outlandish costumes and stuff, running around on stage, playing lots of guitar licks. Wang Dang Sweet Poontang, all these other songs, all about sex, right? And women and sex. That's what it's all about. Sex sells. Nugent played that up to the hilt. And it's got that raunchy feel. There's a lot of these American hair metal bands that had that kind of raunch thing that, maybe we can go back even further to Aerosmith, but certainly to the early Ted Nugent catalog, the guitar pyrotechnics. And here, what was really interesting here, and we saw this a little bit, this was a really interesting point. You had this battle for supremacy in this band between Ted and Derek. And we saw a lot of this kind of stuff later in the 80s. Of course, who won this battle? Ted ultimately won this battle because they both really wanted to be the guy in this band. Couldn't have these two egos going. So Ted eventually won here. We saw this happen in Dokken. We saw this happen in Guns N' Roses. We saw this happen in White Lion. So it was a formula that kind of continued on where, really in the 80s, it's like, well, who should be the focal point of these type of bands? Is it the singer? Is it the guitar player? Are their egos big enough to kind of handle that and coexist? In many cases, that was never to be the case. So I think that Nugent, not only the music, but I think the whole image and the whole way the band was structured, and ultimately the way the band kind of finished up, you couldn't have these two really big ego dudes in the band at the same time, and one was going to always win. And it's, generally speaking, always between the guitarist and the singer. So yeah, Ted Nugent is my next choice.
Yeah, and a big point to be made there is the same as the Aerosmith point, is that the guys who were going to be the hair metal stars grew up on Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent was such a huge star, right? And I got to point out, I posted on my Facebook a while, because every once in a while I see this and I marvel at it. Ted Nugent, the band live on the Fridays show. The clip of them doing, I think they do Paralyzed and Flesh and Blood, but it is the most glorious rock and roll live video thing you've ever seen. I mean, they just turn it on for that, right? But the other thing I noticed the other day when I posted it again is the rest of the band look like very proto-hair metal guys, right? Good looking guys with the long hair, and they're dressed pretty cool. And so, yeah, you see them, morphing at that late period, basically as you get up into State of Shock and Scream Dream, then the wheels fall off, kind of thing. But at that point, yeah, it's you're a couple years ahead of hair metal in there. And it's all short songs, right? Short rock and roll songs.
Short, yeah, short little catchy radio friendly songs. Yeah. And we didn't even really mention it, but then all of a sudden, after you said the wheels kind of came off in the early 80s, then all of a sudden by the middle of the decade, Ted is like jumping back in full speed. It's like I can do this too. I kind of started it, and then all of a sudden you
Yeah.
have that string of albums,
Yeah.
Penetrator and so on and so forth, that are like total hair metal albums, right? Or
Yeah.
Ted's interpretation of them, even though he helped kind of start it all, a decade before.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. My next choice is Dawkins. And for some reason, I no longer have a copy of Breaking the Chains. That's really the one I want to talk about. But so with this, we're really up into the hair metal years already. This is early hair metal. Look at that. That's exactly 1984 early hair metal dressing, right? That's
Yep. Yep.
exactly what it kind of looks like. The hair's not too crazy yet. Dan Brown or whatever. Is it Dan Brown? Somebody Brown. The notorious costume guy that everybody used hasn't gotten involved yet with these bands.
But
I
he
don't.
certainly did with the next album.
Yeah, yeah, right. There you go. There's your there's the difference between 84 and 86, right? But the point I want to make, this is a really cool point. That I remember this like it was yesterday, but I remember being this new wave of British heavy metal fan, and I was trying to figure out this morning, because I could have sworn I heard Paris is Burning or something on a compilation. But anyways, whether it was the compilation or not, the point is Breaking the Chains came out on Career in France in 1981, and then it came out in UK in 82, and then it came out in America in 83. So 83 is our year one for hair metal. But that album, as a 1981 album, it's recorded by Michael Wagner. It's made at Dirk Studios, and what I remember is hearing a Dawkins song or two. And like I say, it wasn't the single. I guess they had a single in 79. I never owned that. But I think I heard Dawkins first on a comp, or like I definitely owned that album as an import as well. But I remember the thought being, wow, this is better recorded, catchier. It just seems like a more professional version of new wave of British heavy metal, right? And I thought, this is really impressive. Listen to that guy sing. I'm not used to having really good, clear vocals that sound like that. There's something new here. This is kind of like a new improvement on this music. And it's kind of interesting. They're from America. Like, there haven't been too many great American bands. And I was thinking there's a real parallel with the way we thought about Metallica Kill 'Em All, right? Thinking this is better than our new wave of British heavy metal bands. And Dawkins on Breaking the Chains, I was saying this is better than our new wave of British heavy metal bands. So it's almost like there's that hair metal was kind of an improvement on the new wave of British heavy metal in all this professionalism and better songwriting and better recording and everything, because all the budgets were better and stuff too, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't such an indie scene, although we did get a Rat EP and a Great White EP and all that kind of stuff, but really it wasn't that indie a scene. So that's the cool thing about Dawkins. I think Van Halen is hands down our most important band, but Dawkins, for a band that's a baby band who's coming into this, there's another baby band that you're going to talk about later that's a little bit similar, but Dawkins is pretty interesting that a good 2 years before they make like the blueprint baby band album for this scene, I think, in Breaking the Chain. So that's my third one.
So, you said something early on there that is intriguing. It just made me think. So, we're talking Don specifically here. So, he's got this very different style of singing compared to a lot of the bands going at the time. And you ever, because you look at Doc and their music, their albums, again, they learned a lot from Van Halen, surely, especially George. But how about Don? You ever like stop to think it's like Don doesn't sound like anybody else? Who were Don Dawkins' influences? He certainly wasn't influenced by the histrionic style of a David Lee Roth, right? He certainly wasn't influenced by the guys in Kiss.
Wow, great
I
point.
mean, he's got this weird kind of laid back melodic voice. He doesn't go for all the crazy shit. Even on stage, he wasn't like a madman or anything like that. Like where did Don get his whole shtick from? I couldn't even tell you.
That's a great question. Yeah. It's like are you singing like this simply because that's all you can do with your voice, or this is what you want to do with your voice, or there's a laziness, or you think this aesthetic works best with your voice? Or like you say, were you influenced by certain singers where you wanted to be just a singer, right?
Yeah. Weird.
Yeah.
All right. My next choice, a pretty obvious one, I think. Motley Crue, specifically Too Fast for Love, right, which was 1981. I think, if you listen to Too Fast for Love and then Shout at the Devil, they're vastly different albums. And then, of course, Crue would go off in all sorts of different directions during the rest of the 80s. But I think Motley Crue basically uh, took their blueprint, obviously from Kiss, obviously from Alice Cooper, obviously from the New York Dolls. Shit, David Bowie, right? I mean, took all those things. And initially, here you have with the debut, you get this kind of fun, reckless attitude. The songs are hard rock, but there's that glam element to it. It's very kind of slick, Live Wire and Piece of Your Action, Public Enemy #1. These anthems, I'm sure they also learned a little bit from Van Halen along the way, but they really set the stage for, the teased hair, the black, the makeup, the leather, the glitz, the spikes, all this kind of stuff, which really opened the doors even further for bands like Poison and Cinderella and Britney Fox and Vixen and Slaughter and LA Guns and on and on and on and on and on. But I think they never really hid where they kind of got their influence from. They said, we're just going to make this and we're going to turn it into something different in the 80s. You had this singer, again, Vince Neil early on, very charismatic, long blonde hair, right? That kind of like, because you really listen to Vince. Vince is not a heavy metal singer, never was. That first album, that's basically glam rock. That's all that is. You have this scary looking guitar player. Mick Mars early on was kind of like the Gene Simmons in the band. Then you got Tommy and Nikki, right, who all the black hair and everything like that. So I think that a lot of what we saw on the image front, because the whole image thing was very, very important to this genre, especially once MTV started really becoming big. So you had these bands that they had to have those catchy anthemic rock songs, but they had to have the look. As they say on the next album, they had the looks to kill, right? Motley Crue had that look, and that's what a lot of bands going forward said, all right, we got to look good and we'll write some good songs, right? So Motley Crue have to be
Yeah,
discussed.
that's interesting. And another parallel you can draw is Motley Crue and Hanoi Rocks. Hanoi Rocks
Yeah.
was not very famous. These are import albums at this time. But people say Motley is influenced by Hanoi. I don't think too much. I mean, they literally are happening at around the same time in the early 80s there. But the interesting thing about them as a parallel is neither of them make a particularly hair metal album for their first album. The Motley Crue is really roughshod and glammy and strange drumming on it and strange production. So it's a record at a time, but the look is perfect. It's
Yeah.
there, right? And then the next album, we're basically into the hair metal thing, but it's early enough and that's commendable. And it sounds much more of a hair metal album, although it's still a little poverty metal, a little shrapnel metal, bladey soundy on Shout at the Devil. But the funny thing is, Hanoi Rocks also has the look perfect, except theirs is a little more feminine than Motley Crue's. And then also the other parallel is that Hanoi Rocks is not making hair metal albums either. I mean, they basically sound like kind of like rocked up Rolling Stones albums.
Yeah, sure.
And so, and they have this line from the New York Dolls going forward as well. So it's funny that there are similarities and differences there, but neither of them are making particularly hair metal music, but they're both contributing. Like Hanoi Rocks, when you look at them in 1981 or whatever, they've just got the look down perfect. So that's why a lot of people say Hanoi Rocks should be considered a big influence on hair metal. Okay, my next choice is Sammy Hagar. And for some reason, I don't have a 3-lock box, which is kind of the one I wanted to talk about the most. But we've got, the interesting thing about Sammy is actually they've got a little bit, or he's got a little bit of that Aerosmith Ted Nugent piece from the 70s as he's toiling away there as this semi-successful solo artist. But as you get up to 3-lock box and Standing Hampton, that whole era, he's getting more commercial. We're getting into the Geffen years, and now he's got a little bit more of that that Canadian thing I was just talking about, right? A little more of that pomp rock, AOR, Midwest rock, right? So he's got all these different. He's kind of like a heavy metal Bryan Adams a little bit, or a hard rock Bryan Adams. So we're into that space where just before we get to hair metal, we're getting this mix of this lighter version of hair metal, this 1982 version of hair metal, which is lighter. and more poppy and a little more Van Morrison and Bruce Springsteen and all of that mixed in with it. And like I said, the Midwest thing. So Sammy's toiling away. First of all, he's important with that early hair metal blueprint with Montrose. And then as he goes through the solo career, he's kind of like a tepid semi hard rock guy that, you know, everybody who wants to make hair metal later, they're liking these albums, they're not loving them. And then like I say, he's even moving with the times and saying, okay, here's that Loverboy piece from me. And I'm going to give you that just before this hair metal thing starts. And then, of course, he participates in hair metal, and then he joins Van Halen, and he's still participating in hair metal. So Sammy Hagar, my next choice.
Yeah, he's kind of like one of the grandfathers of this whole thing, right? You can kind of
Yeah.
look. Yeah, it's yeah for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it's a great pick. Yes, and again, it just goes back to hard rock and anthems and songs that can be played on the radio. I think and Sammy had the look. I think his band was kind of faceless and nameless, I think, but still as kind of like a solo guy for sure. He's a great pick here for um, kind of delivering all those things that we want to hear from bands like this. All right, so alongside Aerosmith and Van Halen, you can't have this conversation without Kiss. Kiss, of course, took their influences, right? It's Crazy World, Arthur Brown and Alice Cooper and whatnot, and these larger than life guys. Again, it comes back to this whole image thing. Image, catchy songs, short songs, right? Martin, you hit the nail on the head. Short, catchy, radio friendly songs. You can't deny how many great songs are in the early Kiss catalog. You got all those early records, which again, the long hair, the makeup, the glitzy, sometimes scary looking costumes, right? So over the top. Could you imagine if there was an MTV in like 1977, Martin?
Yeah.
Kiss would have been even bigger than they were. It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy. But then, again, you're going back to albums, right? So they have those couple of albums as and the solo albums as the decade winds down, the 80s start, that people, maybe kind of fell out of favor with Kiss a little bit. But they come back in 1982 with Creatures of the Night. So now it's okay to once again be kind of heavy again and do this whole thing all over again, right? So we did the concept album, we did the light album, we did the solo albums that most people didn't care about. But you can't say that something like Creatures of the Night, where they balance that kind of 70s aesthetic with the image once again and the heaviness. Is Motley Crue not paying attention? Is Wasp and Rat not paying attention? I'm sure they are. But this album, their heaviest in years, showed that you can kind of have all that stuff again. You got the guitar solos on here. It's heavy, it's melodic. And I think along with, like I said, Aerosmith and Van Halen, I think Kiss, I mean, you talk to any of those bands on the LA scene, would any of them not say that Kiss wasn't one of the bands that they grew up with? I'm sure they all would. So I think you have to include Kiss into this whole thing. And then, Kiss always following the scene, right? They take off the makeup and they dive even deeper into the hair metal thing because they see everybody around them influenced by what they did before and now becoming really popular. Like, let's take the makeup off. Let's make songs that are even catchier. We'll tone down the darkness a little bit. We'll do videos. We're showing off our faces. Now we're wearing regular clothes. They got the scarves. They got all this fun stuff. So Kiss just said, all right, we're going to play a ball and we're going to do it like everybody else is doing, even though we kind of helped start all this thing. So yeah, Kiss, have to be mentioned here.
Yeah, that's a great choice because again, like Sammy, but even better, they straddle both worlds. So you've got the version of Kiss that is doing, lighting a fire under these guys, saying that's all I want to do for a living. I just give me those drumsticks or that guitar. So they're doing the Ted Nugent and Aerosmith thing then, and then Creatures of the Night is a great choice because it's the same as Too Fast for Love, Doc and Breaking the Chains, and the 5 Van Halen albums. So they've got an album right before the thing kicks off that is setting a blueprint, and that's a really important album, and people don't give it enough credit for that. And then the other thing they don't give enough credit for is that Lick It Up is a perfect hair metal album at year zero, along with the other year zero albums that kind of get all the credit because we tend to talk about the baby bands more and we forget the big bands who are, but you got to give Kiss credit for being right there at year zero and then just pumping out albums right through that whole thing. and being huge participators in it, right?
Yeah, I mean, look it up, Asylum, Animalize, you have to talk about those, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just the big albums for the band, no doubt, but also just showing all the young bands that, hey, these veterans, man, they're doing it just as good as anybody. They've changed their ways a little bit, right? They were brave enough to take the makeup off, get rid of the costumes, right? And just be regular guys up there playing this kind of party friendly, accessible heavy
Well,
rock.
and the other thing they did that was different is they got a shredder and they got a fancy drummer, right?
Yes,
So they
good
picked it
point.
up that way too.
Good
And
point.
the
Yep,
outside
absolutely.
songwriters and all that stuff. They did everything. They did everything that you're supposed to do in hair metal, right? So
Yep.
okay, my next choice is White Snake. Um, and another one I don't have a copy of anymore, Saints and Sinners. But basically the whole White Snake situation is interesting in that they're too small and they're too bluesy and they're too obscure to be much of an influence in the purity days, the early days of Whitesnake.
Here anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in fact, yeah, you're right. In fact, they're almost like more part of the new wave of British heavy metal at that point. And then later we know they're a massive hair metal band. But in the middle, they have, speaking of Kiss, they have the two albums that I consider the Kiss albums. They have Come and Get It and Saints and Sinners, which I feel like, and a little bit slided in as well, I would say. Actually a fair bit. So I'd say those three are a trilogy of the White Snake Kiss albums, where they're really simple and straightforward and chordy, not particularly bluesy, so they're party rock. So I think you get a real nice, even though I don't think the influence is there, and I don't know how much they warrant in terms of being like credible influences and everything. But it is kind of cool that Saints and Sinners and Come and Get It. So you got an 81 and an 82 are kind of right in there with Creatures of the Night, Breaking the Chains, and Too Fast for Love, and the 5 Van Halen albums. So you could build a whole little catalog of the true, like right next to the adjacent things. We're bringing up a few things that are a little further away, like Loverboy and Sammy Hagar and whatnot, but there are the true, just right adjacent ones. And Come and Get It, actually, probably out of the three of them, is the most like, here's your blueprint for hair metal right here, kind of thing. So that's my fifth choice.
Lyrically, right? For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need to be a brain surgeon to realize what all those Whitesnake songs are about.
Yeah.
Coverdale's notorious for it's writing about sex and chicks and whatnot. That's what it's all about. Short songs, right?
Yeah.
Dual guitar players, right? Kind of bluesy. I mean, yeah, it's for sure. All right. How about Def Leppard? So
Okay.
for me, the lone non-American band in this whole discussion. But I think, for a band that long considered one of the originators of the early new wave of British heavy metal scene, especially with the debut On Through the Night, starting with High and Dry, here you got the twin guitar sound, which a lot of bands did. You got the gritty riffs, you got the catchy melodies. See, I think like this band, we've talked about a lot of other of the more, mid 80s, the bigger bands, but I think that like Def Leppard, I think really made an impact on bands like Skid Row, on Bon Jovi, ironically more American bands, Tesla, the Bullet Boys, where you could have like twin guitars, right? And it's okay. You can have a singer that's not necessarily the main focal point in the band all the time. You can have songs that rock quite a bit, but have that accessible edge. And most importantly, bring it on the heartbreak. Is that the blueprint for all the power ballads that came afterwards? I would
Yeah.
argue, yeah.
Yeah.
There's sense of melody on this album, and certainly the ones to follow, right? Which they dive right in. All of a sudden, the big production values, the sugary sweet choruses, and all that. I think paved the way for a lot of bands. So, for all of those folks who maybe don't want to consider them as part of the new wave of British heavy metal because they were so different from all the other bands, even though they were around at the same time. I'd argue that they're more influential to hair and glam metal than they are to anything new wave or British heavy metal. And you can really, it starts all right here. They hook up a Mutt Lang and all of a sudden they're like, all right, we can write great songs. We kind of got the look, but we're still going to rock because I think especially with this album really does rock. But as we saw, there were a good amount of the hair metal bands who also did rock quite a bit, but they had all the other qualities like the good looking singer, the long hair, the image and all that stuff. But yeah, Def Leppard for sure has to be discussed.
Yeah, pretty interesting. So we're building a little bank of 1981 albums. So if we want to say, there's you could pick whatever, the Van Halen album and pop it in there, which would be that would be fair warning, right?
Yep.
Is Creatures 81 or 82? I kind of forget. But I mean, we've got this one,
82,
we've got
82. Creatures of 82.
82. Okay, so leave Creatures out, but we've got the Dokken, we've got the Motley Crue, and yeah, Def Leppard's perfect. So you've got and also give them a lot of credit. Sometimes even forget to put them in there for the Year Zero album. They've got the biggest Year Zero album of all of them in Pyromania, but this one absolutely sets up that whole thing. So it's perfect. The big drums, Mutt Lange, and all that.
Yep.
Okay, my last one is a little bit of an obscure choice. It's a little bit along that Canadian narrative I made. And I'm Canadian. I'm the first one to run down Canadian bands all the time. So this is almost like almost against nature to talk about Canada this much. But Triumph with Just a Game, Progressions of Power, Into Allied Forces. What you get with this band is, so this is a band that's actually a little bit like both worlds, right? You've got Triumph, you got Rock and Roll Machines, you got a 76 and a 77. So they're in that space along with Moxie and Early Tees, being the hard rock band, the poorer cousins to your Aerosmiths and Teds and Kisses. But then later on, with these albums, they're operating in not so much as the perfect adjacent to hair metal thing, but they're really operating in that Sammy Hagar zone, right? They're operating in that AOR pop metal, pomp rock, dated, because we have to call it dated because hair metal sweeps all this aside. Essentially, hair metal is a different thing. So Triumph never did hair metal. They certainly tried, and they fell flat on their face.
Yeah, those
They
latter albums. Yeah,
terrible job of it, right? As did April Wine. So neither of them could do it, right? But both of those bands, interestingly enough, are operating in that 81, 82 space perfectly fine with Harder, Faster, Nature of the Beast power play. And with Triumph, it's like, Progressions of Power, Allied Forces, Never Surrender. So they're doing that well, and they're having some success with it. But it's almost like hair metal killed new wave of British heavy metal, or thrash killed new wave of British heavy metal. Hair metal killed this 81, 82 Loverboy version of this stuff, which, like I say, weirdly, a lot of these bands came from Canada. I don't know why, but they did. So this stuff became dated pretty fast. Triumph became dated. They had a little bit of a hangover of success by getting on the US Festival, and they're still living the life somewhat with Never Surrender, but then the wheels fall completely off and they can't do hair metal, they find out.
Yeah, those last couple albums, I mean, they have their moments, but it's like they're trying too hard. I think, Triumph, again, a power trio, right? None of these other bands we're talking about were power trios. And I think they were never quite the artsy band that Rush was. I think part of early on they wanted to be. That really wasn't their thing. I think, Triumph's biggest strengths was that they were just a great melodic hard rock band. And I think trying to do the image thing, because they grew the hair long too, and they tried to do those kind of syrupy sweet choruses and things like that. It really wasn't what they were all about. I mean, Just the Game and Allied Forces, and even Never Surrender to an extent. That's Triumph. That's what they do best. And to deviate from that, I think, was a mistake. And as you could see by the not too successful sales of the albums that came afterwards, once they kind of started to veer off into a place where they didn't really belong, it didn't really quite work out. So,
yeah.
All right, my last choice. Martin talked a little bit ago about these baby bands that kind of popped up right around this time. Well, a perfect choice for this, one of these baby bands, 1982's Dawn Patrol from Night Ranger. And again, this is a formula that's a little bit different. So here, these guys took this approach of combining pop hooks with guitar virtuosity and keyboards, right? Not a lot of these other bands we're talking about did the whole keyboard thing. And so obviously getting some of their influences, sure, Van Halen, but more like Styx. You hear a lot of Styx in this music. That's a band you could probably talk about in this capacity as well as some of the prog legends as well, and utilizing those dual lead vocals. again, the whole sticks thing. So you got a drummer and a bass player who both sing very well, both sound very, very different. And you got these two amazing, amazing guitar players. And I think, you look at the catalog of Night Ranger overall, probably this is probably their heaviest, most hard rocking album. And then they became huge after this. But I think that this band always had a lot of really strong cred with the heavier metal crowd because of the virtuosity in this band, because they have these two complete shredders in Brad Gillis and Jeff Watson. I think that always, even though they had a lot of hits and they had a lot of pop songs and whatnot, I think most rockers still really appreciated Night Ranger for that whole virtuosity thing. The bands like, Striper and Firehouse and certainly Winger, I think, learned a lot from what the trails that Night Ranger blazed early on. And you also had Brad Gillis, right, who played with Ozzy briefly. You ever stop to think, it's looking how like almost hair metally some of those later 80s Ozzy albums were, The Ultimate Sin and even Bark at the Moon a little bit. Imagine if Brad had stayed in Night Ranger, or had stayed in Ozzy's band and not gone back to form Night Ranger. You ever wonder like what that would have meant to both him and to Ozzy's career going forward? I don't know. But I think that a lot of the band started doing something similar. And again, this is a little bit different because it's less about the image with these guys, more about the pop hooks and, hey, we can play guitars really, really well. And I think we had a whole bunch of other bands that were kind of doing this thing to follow, that you can have a bit of success. You can write really, really, really catchy songs that feature a lot of shredding too as well. So yeah, Night Ranger.
Nice. Yeah, so that was a good survey. That's a lot of weird little building blocks that built this thing, right? So
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And
like we talked about in our 79 episode, there was a downtime for metal. So you've got that weird gully, and you've got the new wave of British heavy metal kind of invents hair metal as well. There's that weird link, but this is perfect. Like this whole the keyboardy, the Midwest rock thing, the pomp rock. We had a whole pomp rock episode. Remember we did that one?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
At some point, and then what was the other one? Power pop. Power pop kind of matters a little bit as well, but yeah, I think there's an interesting, weird kind of dated genre. That a lot of what we talked about here, I don't even know what we call it, but I guess we kind of call it AOR, but even that can mean various things. But yeah, there's this weird 81, 82 period with this kind of music that didn't last very long, right?
Yeah, it's we can discuss forever, like what do you call this stuff? So and again, like I said earlier on, I know a lot of people hate the term hair metal. We didn't create it, right? But when you mention it, everybody knows what you're talking about. Is it really heavy metal? Probably not. Is it pop? Probably not. I think, you mentioned the pomp thing. I think it's a combination of that and hard rock. It's basically just commercial, glitzy hard rock is really what it is. That's, in a sense, all the stuff we're talking about, that's what it is. But
we didn't even talk about Journey and Foreigner, that whole thing, right?
Right. Well, yeah, because you have to, right? Because those late 70s albums, again, you have these, on those first couple of Foreigner albums, certainly Journey Infinity and Evolution and Departure, you have these pretty rocking songs with these just soaring vocal harmonies, right? It's okay to have catchy melodies and choruses. It really is. You got lots of guitar solos on those albums. You got some, crunchy riffs. Have an early Quiet Riot, Martin, right? Those first two albums with Randy Rhoads, which nobody talks about other than the fact that Randy Rhoads is in the band. I mean, those albums did some business in Japan, never officially got released here early on, but man, that's even basically predating the Motley Crue album, right? And all that stuff is going on there too. We could throw Heart into this discussion. How about Sweet?
Yeah.
Because Sweet really had the image thing. They rocked. You had a couple singers in the band. You had catchy songs. It was fairly heavy at times, fairly poppy at times. I think you got to talk about David Bowie here as well. The Ziggy era. It's got a lot of influence on this whole thing. Heart, perhaps. I think even Montrose, because Montrose were really the first popular American heavy metal band. There's the Sammy Hagar connection. There's the short songs. There's the connection to maybe what early Van Halen were doing. So I think Montrose has to be discussed here as well.
And the funny thing also, you bring up Sweet, but glam means two totally different things, right? It's a genre tag that's added, stuck on two things. Sweet happens to be the band that made the same kind of music as the hair metal people, and the other ones, none of them did, kind of thing, right?
Right.
But it was that look and that tag that goes along with it. So
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the glam stuff from the 70s was very British sounding. It wasn't really heavy. So when you had, it was all about the look and the attitude and these very kind of quirky, you know, songs and things like that. So between, you know, T-Rex and Bowie and Slade and all these other bands. But yeah, Sweet, you know, all of a sudden like added on some of those albums and songs, Sweet kind of took that and added this kind of like heavy metal thunder behind it too, which I think was really, really important. So yeah, I mean, we can go on and on. There's so many, I'm sure there's other bands we haven't mentioned today that also played a contributing factor to a lot of these American bands that came out. And, you know, we really didn't even talk about, uh, you know, this whole hair metal craze was, of course, huge here in the States, but there were bands around the world that were also doing this sort of thing too, that kind of fell in line with this. You know, you could like Loudness, right? Even though those early Loudness albums, you know, from Japan were fairly heavy, it's like all of a sudden they became like the Japanese Van Halen, like, you know, starting with Thunder in the East and albums going forward. So it wasn't just here, but it was a craze here. It was a really big thing here. So for folks watching who maybe are not from North America and they're kind of like, yeah, you know, I know Bon Jovi and I know a couple other bands, but you know, it was never really a thing where we lived. It was a thing here for all those years. I mean, really up until, you know, it was killed by grunge, but that was early 90s. So from like 83, 84 and onwards, man, it's big business for bands doing this sort of thing. And MTV jumped all over it, record labels jumped all over it, and radio jumped all over it. It's like you couldn't go anywhere without hearing this stuff, you know, whether it be Cinderella or, you know, Poison or whoever else. I mean, it's just absolutely huge. Absolutely huge.
cool, nice.
All right, Martin, what's going on with all your outlets this week?
Well, you could check out my audio podcast, History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff. The latest episode that just went up was about Chris Tangerides, so going through everything he did. And yeah, we did our album cover show on the Contrarians. So we got our YouTube channel, and the books are all at martinpopoff.com. The latest one is Perfect Water, the Rebel Imaginos. But yeah, still got the Kiss at 50. Just did an interview for that the other day with a couple of good buddies of mine, Market and those guys. 3 sides of the coin. And yeah, that's about it. Yeah, we've got some other Contrarians ones we've done that are going to go up. Legacy of the Black album, and what else? We get the weird Contrarian show that happened about Are You a Contrarian, which I turned into a podcast episode as well. But I'm rambling now, so there you go.
Are you a contrarian? I think folks know deep down inside if they are a contrarian, right? It's amazing because you have made that term famous now because I never heard anybody say contrarian ever until I met you, Martin. And then like now all of a sudden, because everybody knows you so well, it's like, you know, I hear people saying, yeah, I'm being contrarian on that. I'm like, see what Martin started. Now everybody's contrarian. All right, what do we got coming up here on the channel? So just a couple hours, Ken Golden will be taking Martin's spot in the Zoom, and it's time for the professor's picks because it's Friday, new release day. Ken's got some stuff for you that's coming out, releasing today. And then we have tonight. Don't miss out on the February edition of For Fusion Friday. We're going back to 1974 because it's 50 years ago that a lot of great albums were released in 1974. We got 4 really great fusion albums from 1974 that are going to do battle on the show, so that's happening tonight. Stanley Clarke and Larry Coryell and a couple others, so join the crew tonight for that. And then we've got ranking the albums on Sunday. Nick Franco from the Hudson Valley Squares and myself will be ranking the albums of Anathema, so all 11 albums, so it's going to be epic. Stay tuned for that and a lot more, and visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Also down below, down there, down underneath Martin and myself, you got the links to our Ko-Fi page for channel donations, our merch page, and our Cameo page. So thank you in advance for all your support there. We'll see you next Friday here at the Funhouse alongside Martin Popoff. I am Pete Pardo. Have a good weekend, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.